Dr. Sarah Chun adjusted her glasses for the fifth time in 10 minutes, a nervous habit that had followed her through 3 degrees and into the most important meeting of her career. The Galactic Sciences Council chamber stretched before her like a coliseum, its crystalline walls reflecting the bioluminescent patterns of a dozen different species. She sat alone at the human delegation table, a small island of silence in an ocean of chittering, warbling, and harmonic conversations. The Zephyrians floated in their gravity bubbles, their translucent bodies pulsing with colors that indicated their mood. Currently, those colors leaned heavily toward the purple spectrum of amusement and the orange of condescension. The Karathi delegation filled nearly a quarter of the chamber, their insectoid forms clicking and buzzing in what Sarah had learned was their equivalent of laughter. Even the usually stoic Valdari seemed more animated than usual, their stone-like features cracked with what might have been smiles. Ambassador Zintar of the Karathi rose from his delegation, his 4 arms spreading wide in a gesture of address. His compound eyes fixed on Sarah with predatory focus. Honored Council, his voice buzzed through the universal translator. We have heard the humans' proposal for the Andromeda expedition. While we appreciate Earth's enthusiasm, we must consider the practical realities. A wave of harmonic laughter rippled through the chamber. Sarah's fingers tightened around her data pad, but she remained silent, her dark eyes taking in every detail of the room. She had learned long ago that in a galaxy full of species eager to demonstrate their superiority, sometimes the most powerful thing a human could do was listen. Humans, Zintar continued, his mandibles clicking with each word, are remarkable in their own way. Their emotional volatility has produced some interesting art, and their breeding rates suggest they might make adequate colonists under proper supervision. But leading an expedition to another galaxy, to establish humanity as the primary species in Andromeda? The laughter grew louder. A Zephyrian noble named Velnura drifted closer to the speaking platform, her bioluminescent patterns shifting to bright yellows and greens of mirth. Ambassador Zentar speaks wisely. Humans have been part of our galactic community for what, 50 standard cycles? We Zephyrians have been exploring space for over 10,000. The Karathi for 8. Even the youngest species here, the Threnodidae, have 3,000 years of stellar experience. Sarah's colleague, Dr. Michael Rodriguez, had warned her this would happen. Earth's delegation had sent 12 scientists and diplomats, but, one by one, they had been recalled or reassigned. Too confrontational, the Earth Council had said. Too emotional. Not diplomatic enough. Now only Sarah remained, and, as each day passed, the other species seemed to forget she was even there. It wasn't that they hated humans. Hatred would have been easier to deal with. Instead, they treated humanity like a precocious child that had somehow stumbled into the adult conversation. They found human ambition amusing in the same way one might find a kitten trying to hunt a lion. The Andromeda expedition represents the greatest undertaking in galactic history, continued another voice, this one belonging to Counselor Thorek of the Valdari. His species had evolved from silicon-based organisms on high-gravity worlds, making them incredibly durable but slow to change. 2.5 million light-years to another galaxy, with the intent of establishing permanent colonies. The logistics alone would challenge species with millennia of experience. Humans propose to lead this effort with what is their longest space mission? 200 standard cycles to their outer system. Actually, Sarah said quietly, speaking for the first time in 3 hours, it was 437 standard cycles to establish our deep space monitoring station at Proxima Centauri. The chamber fell silent for a moment. Then, the laughter resumed, louder than before. Zentar's compound eyes glittered. Ah, the human speaks. Yes, for 100 cycles to reach another star in their own system. And, from this vast experience, they believe they can organize an intergalactic expedition. Sarah nodded thoughtfully, making a note on her data pad. They spoke of the Andromeda project as if it were their birthright, debating which species should take primary leadership, which technologies should be used, how the colonies should be structured. The Zephyrians favored their bioadaptive vessels, ships grown rather than built, that could modify themselves for different environments. The Karathi pushed for their swarm logic systems, where thousands of smaller ships worked in perfect coordination. The Valdari wanted their slow but unstoppable construction methods, turning asteroids into cities over centuries of careful work. What the expedition needs, announced Prime Scientist Kythera of the Threnodai, her crystalline voice ringing like chimes, is proven stability. My people have successfully managed 17 galactic expeditions, including the Great Survey that mapped 60% of the galaxy's habitable worlds. 17 expeditions to worlds within our own galaxy, corrected Zentar. This will be different. This will require unprecedented coordination between species, shared resources on a scale never before attempted. The humans. He gestured vaguely towards Sarah's table, as if she were a museum exhibit. The humans think in terms of single lifespans. This project will take millennia. Sarah continued taking notes, her pen moving steadily across the data pad. She recorded their arguments, their concerns, their proposed solutions. She noted their fundamental assumptions about the project, their approaches to resource management, their timelines, and expectations. Perhaps, suggested Velnara, her patterns now shifting to contemplative blues and purples, humans could serve in support roles. Their emotional nature might make them effective at maintaining morale among colonist populations. Under proper guidance, of course. Support roles, agreed Counselor Thorek. Their adaptability might prove useful in preliminary survey work. Dangerous work, naturally, but humans seem to have a tolerance for risk that borders on the irrational. The discussion continued for another 2 hours. Species after species outlined their qualifications, their technologies, their grand visions for Andromedian civilization. Through it all, Sarah sat quietly, listening and learning. When the session finally ended, the delegates began filing out in their various ways, the Zephyrians drifting, the Karathi skittering, the Valdari moving with ponderous dignity. As the chamber emptied, Ambassador Zentar approached Sarah's table, his 4 arms folded in what she recognized as a gesture of polite dismissal. Dr. Chun, is it? We hope you found today's discussion educational. When you return to Earth, please convey our appreciation for humanity's interest in the project. I'm sure your people will find meaningful ways to contribute to the effort. Sarah looked up at him, her dark eyes calm and unreadable. Ambassador, may I ask you something? Of course, he clicked, his mandibles spreading in what might have been a patronizing smile. In all the proposals I've heard today, what's the projected timeline for the Andromeda expedition? Projected timeline? Zentar's compound eyes blinked in sequence. Perhaps 50,000 standard cycles, if all goes according to plan. And the expected success rate? Success rate. The question seemed to puzzle him. Well, naturally there will be challenges. Perhaps 60% of the initial colony ships will successfully establish lasting settlements. That's quite optimistic, actually, given the distances and unknowns involved. Sarah nodded and made another note. One more question, if you don't mind. What's driving the urgency for this project? Why Andromeda, and why now? For the first time, Zentar's confident demeanor flickered. His compound eyes darkened, and his mandibles clicked nervously. Surely the human delegation has been briefed on the situation. Humor me. Zentar glanced around the nearly empty chamber, then leaned closer. When he spoke, his voice had lost its mocking tone. The galaxy is dying, Dr. Chun. Not quickly, not in a way that most beings notice, but the signs are unmistakable to those who know how to read them. The central black hole's activity has increased by 12% over the last millennium. The dark matter currents that maintain galactic stability are shifting. Our greatest scientists estimate we have perhaps 100,000 years before large sections of the galaxy become uninhabitable. And you believe Andromeda represents a solution? Not just a solution, the only solution. A new galaxy, untouched by our current problems. A chance to preserve our civilizations beyond the death of this one. Sarah studied his face, noting the genuine fear behind his earlier arrogance. Thank you for your honesty, Ambassador. As Zentar walked away, Sarah remained at her table, alone in the vast chamber. The weight of what she had learned settled around her like a shroud. 100,000 years sounded like forever to a human, but to species that thought in geological timescales, it was barely enough time to pack. She opened her secure communication link and composed a message to Earth. As her fingers moved across the holographic interface, she began to smile, not the polite, diplomatic smile she had worn all day, but something sharp and determined. The message was brief. Phase 1 complete. Request immediate authorization for Phase 2. The situation is exactly as we predicted. They still think we're children. Perfect. S. Chun. She sealed the message with her personal encryption key and sent it through the quantum relay to Earth. Then, she gathered her notes, closed her data pad, and walked calmly out of the chamber. Tomorrow's session would be even more interesting. Behind her, the empty chamber hummed with the residual energy of a dozen different technologies. But Sarah Chun was already 3 steps ahead, her mind racing through calculations and possibilities that none of the superior species had even considered. After all, they had made one critical error in their assessment of humanity. They assumed that 50 years in galactic society meant humans were newcomers to survival. They had forgotten that humans were newcomers to peace. Sarah's private quarters aboard the orbital station were spartanly furnished compared to the elaborate suites occupied by other species delegates. Where the Zephyrians had biogardens that filtered their atmosphere, and the Karathi maintained complex hive chambers, Sarah had requested only basic human accommodations: a bed, a desk, a quantum communication array, and, most importantly, complete privacy. The reply from Earth had arrived 18 hours after her message, faster than she had expected. The council must have been waiting. Sarah activated the holographic display and watched as Director Harrison's tired face materialized above her desk. Dr. Chun, Harrison's voice carried across the light years with crystal clarity. Your report confirms our worst fears and our best hopes. Phase 2 authorization is granted with full discretionary powers. The President herself has signed the orders. You know what this means? Sarah nodded grimly. It means we stop pretending to be the junior species. More than that, it means we reveal exactly what humanity has been doing for the past 50 years while everyone else assumed we were playing catch-up. Harrison leaned forward, his eyes intense even through the holographic transmission. Sarah, what you're about to show them will change everything. Are you ready for that responsibility? Sarah thought of the laughter in the council chamber, of Ambassador Zintar's patronizing tone, of the casual dismissal of human capabilities. But, more than that, she thought of the fear she had seen in Zintar's eyes when he spoke of the dying galaxy. Fear that none of these ancient species, for all their wisdom and technology, seemed capable of addressing with the urgency it demanded. I'm ready, Director. Good. The Manhattan files are being transferred to your secure partition now. Everything we've developed, every project we've hidden, every capability we've built while they thought we were struggling with basic interstellar travel. Harrison paused, rubbing his temples. Sarah, they're going to be angry. More than angry. Some of them might consider what we've done an act of deception. Some of them might consider it an act of war, Sarah corrected. But that's a risk we'll have to take. Director, how many species know about the galactic situation? The real situation? According to our intelligence, only the leadership of the 5 primary species. They've been hiding it from their own populations, let alone the younger civilizations. They're trying to maintain stability while they figure out a solution. Sarah accessed the transferred files, her eyes widening as folder after folder appeared on her display. Project Lazarus, Deep Strike, Quantum Garden, Prometheus Initiative, Pandora Network. Names she had heard whispered in the highest security briefings on Earth, projects that supposedly didn't exist. My God, she whispered. We really did it, didn't we? Every single project. While they were laughing at our primitive space program, we were revolutionizing physics. While they were condescending to our emotional volatility, we were turning that volatility into the greatest innovation drive the galaxy has ever seen. Harrison's face hardened. Sarah, tomorrow you're not just representing humanity. You're representing the future of galactic civilization. Don't let us down. The transmission ended, leaving Sarah alone with terabytes of classified data that would rewrite every assumption the Galactic Council had about human capabilities. She began to read, and, as the hours passed, her amazement grew. Project Lazarus had solved faster-than-light travel in a completely different way from the galactic standard. Where other species used complex gravitational manipulation or biospatial folding, humans had discovered how to temporarily phase matter into quantum superposition, effectively allowing ships to exist in multiple locations simultaneously before collapsing back into normal space at their destination. The implications were staggering. Travel times measured in hours instead of years, even across galactic distances. Deep Strike revealed humanity's true military capabilities. While the Council assumed humans had basic defensive systems, Earth had actually developed weaponry that could turn stars into weapons, redirect asteroid belts, and create localized gravitational anomalies. The technology was based on principles that none of the galactic species had even theorized. But it was the Quantum Garden project that made Sarah's hands tremble as she read. Humanity hadn't just solved interstellar agriculture. They had created self-replicating terraforming systems that could turn dead worlds into garden paradises in decades, not centuries. Moreover, these systems were scalable. Given enough resources, they could terraform entire galactic sectors. By dawn, Sarah had absorbed enough classified material to restructure the entire galactic economy. As she prepared for the day's session, she felt the weight of knowledge settling on her shoulders. Today, she would stop being the quiet observer and become something the galaxy had never seen before, a human who refused to pretend she couldn't win. The council chamber filled with its usual collection of beings, their conversations following the same patterns as the previous day. Sarah took her place at the human delegation table, but this time she didn't sit passively. She activated her personal holographic display and began setting up presentation materials. Ambassador Zentar noticed first, his compound eyes tracking her movements with new interest. Dr. Chun, do you have a contribution to today's discussion? I do, actually. Sarah's voice carried clearly across the chamber, and for the first time since arriving, she didn't sound hesitant or deferential. Yesterday you asked about humanity's qualifications to lead the Andromeda expedition. I think it's time I answered that question properly. A ripple of amusement passed through the chamber. Velnara's bioluminescent patterns shifted to entertained yellows. By all means, Dr. Chun. We're eager to hear humanity's perspective. Sarah stood, her presentation materials coalescing into a three-dimensional display above her table. But instead of showing Earth's official space program statistics, the display showed something else entirely. Star charts with impossible travel times, energy readings that defied known physics, and technological specifications that made several delegates lean forward in confusion. These are the actual specifications for humanity's deep space capabilities, Sarah began, her voice steady and professional. Project Lazarus has achieved consistent faster-than-light travel, with journey times averaging 1.2 hours per 1,000 light-years. Our longest test run was to the Andromeda galaxy itself, a round trip completed in 8 standard days. The chamber fell silent. Even the constantly chittering Karathi delegation stopped their background noise. Counselor Thorax's stone features creased in confusion. Dr. Chun, those figures are impossible. Our fastest ships require months to cross galactic distances. Your ships use gravitational manipulation, Sarah replied calmly. Ours use quantum superposition. Completely different approach, completely different results. She gestured, and the display shifted to show technical specifications that made the Zephyrian delegation's bioluminescent patterns flicker to confused patterns of violet and gray. But, your species has only been in space for 300 of your years, stammered Prime Scientist Kethera. We've observed your technology development. You're barely past chemical propulsion. Sarah smiled, and, for the first time, it wasn't polite or diplomatic. It was the smile of a predator revealing its teeth. You've observed what we wanted you to observe. Tell me, in 50 years of contact with humanity, how many of our worlds have you actually visited? The question hung in the air. Sarah already knew the answer. Only Earth, and only the specific locations humanity had designated for alien contact. The entire galactic community had assumed that humans were limited to a single world, with perhaps a few small colonies in their local system. We've respected your sovereignty, Zentar said slowly, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. We assumed you needed time to develop. To develop what? The ability to hide 1,400 colony worlds across 47 different star systems. Sarah's presentation shifted again, showing a stellar map that made every being in the chamber recoil. Human settlements dotted the display like stars, spread across a section of space they all thought was empty. Or perhaps you meant time to develop industrial capacity. Our terraforming operations are currently active on 600 worlds, with completion timelines averaging 30 standard cycles per world. Velnara's entire body had shifted to deep, alarmed reds and purples. Impossible. We would have detected industrial operations of that magnitude. Not if we didn't want you to. Sarah activated another display. Quantum garden technology operates below the threshold of your sensor networks. We learned very early that if we were going to survive in a galaxy of species who treated us like children, we needed to be invisible until we were ready. The implications were sinking in now. Sarah could see it in the way the delegates shifted, in the changing patterns of bioluminescence, in the nervous clicking of mandibles. They had assumed humanity was weak, barely out of their home system, struggling with basic space travel. Instead, they were looking at a species that had quietly become the largest single presence in their local galactic sector. Dr. Chun, Counselor Thorek's voice was carefully controlled. What exactly are you saying? I'm saying that humanity withdraws our previous offer to participate as a junior partner in the Andromeda expedition. Sarah's voice remained calm, professional, even as she delivered what amounted to a declaration of independence. Instead, we're offering to allow other species to participate as partners in the Human Andromeda Initiative. The silence stretched for long seconds. Then, Zentar's voice cut through the air, sharp with anger and growing fear. You're claiming that you can mount an intergalactic expedition independently? That humanity alone has the resources to colonize another galaxy? I'm not claiming anything, Sarah replied evenly. I'm stating facts. The Andromeda Galaxy contains approximately 1 trillion star systems. Conservative estimates suggest 10 billion potentially habitable worlds. Our current expansion rate would allow us to establish colonies on 50 million of those worlds within the first 1,000 standard cycles of the expedition. She gestured again, and the display showed projections that made even the long-lived species in the chamber gasp. Waves of human expansion spreading across Andromeda like ripples in a pond, terraforming and colonizing at a rate that dwarfed anything the galactic community had imagined possible. This is unacceptable, Velnara said, her patterns now shifting rapidly between anger and fear. No single species can be allowed to dominate an entire galaxy. The balance of power. The balance of power, Sarah interrupted, is no longer what you thought it was. For 50 years, you've treated humanity as an amusing newcomer species. You've been polite, condescending, and patient with our supposed limitations. What you failed to consider is that we were never limited. We were preparing. Ambassador Zentar rose from his delegation, all 4 arms spread in a gesture of challenge. And if the Galactic Council decides that humanity's expansion represents a threat to galactic stability? Sarah looked at him steadily, her dark eyes reflecting none of the submission or deference she had shown the previous day. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of 1,400 worlds and technologies that could reshape reality itself. Ambassador, let me ask you something in return. She paused, letting the question build. Should I pretend I can't win? The chamber erupted in noise, chittering, harmonics, the sound of stone grinding against stone as the Valdari shifted in agitation. But Sarah Chun stood quietly in the center of it all, waiting for them to understand that the conversation had fundamentally changed. The age of human deference was over. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 6 hours after Sarah's revelation, in a chamber deep within the station's core where no recording devices were permitted and psychic dampeners prevented telepathic species from sharing what they witnessed. The usual grandeur of the main council chamber had been replaced by utilitarian metal walls and harsh lighting that cast sharp shadows across worried faces. Sarah sat alone at a table designed for the human delegation, but the empty chairs beside her now seemed less like isolation and more like strategic positioning. Across from her, the 5 primary species had arranged themselves in what could only be described as a defensive formation. Director Kethvar of the Zephyrian Intelligence Collective floated at the center, her normally graceful movements now sharp with agitation. Dr. Chun, your claims require verification. We're prepared to dispatch survey teams to confirm these alleged human colonies. You're welcome to try. Sarah replied mildly. Though I should warn you that our territorial defense systems might register survey ships as potential threats. We've had some problems with pirates in the outer sectors. The implied threat hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Prime Admiral Vextar of the Karathi War Council leaned forward, his mandibles clicking rapidly in barely controlled aggression. Dr. Chun, are you suggesting that humanity would fire on Council survey vessels? I'm suggesting that our automated defense systems don't distinguish between Council vessels and any other unauthorized ship entering our territory. Sarah consulted her data pad with apparent calm. Of course, if you submit the proper requests through diplomatic channels, we'd be happy to provide escort services for any authorized visits. The casual arrogance of the statement sent ripples of shock through the assembly. For 50 years, the galactic community had operated under the assumption that they could go anywhere in the galaxy they pleased, that their technological superiority guaranteed their access to any region of space. The idea that humans might actually have the power to deny them passage was revolutionary. Counselor Zarn of the Valdari Deep Analysis Division spoke with the careful precision of his species. Dr. Chun, even accepting your technological claims at face value, the resource requirements for what you describe are impossible. The energy expenditure alone would require the output of hundreds of star systems. Sarah smiled and activated her holographic display. The image that appeared made every being in the chamber freeze. It showed a star, but not as any of them had ever seen one. Massive structures surrounded it, drinking its energy through collection fields that spanned millions of kilometers. Dyson Sphere technology, adapted for rapid deployment. We call them stellar batteries. We currently operate 47 of them. The silence stretched until Prime Scientist Lefera of the Threnodai barely managed to whisper, 47 Dyson spheres? The energy output would be approximately 6 trillion terawatts per hour per sphere, Sarah supplied helpfully. More than sufficient to power our current expansion rate, with enough surplus to begin the Andromeda project immediately. Admiral Vextar's compound eyes had darkened to the deep red of barely controlled rage. How long? How long have you been building this empire, while pretending to be a developing species? We weren't pretending anything. You made assumptions, and we saw no reason to correct them. Sarah's tone remained conversational, but something sharp glinted in her eyes. Honestly, we were grateful for your condescension. It gave us time to prepare without interference. Director Kethvar's bioluminescent patterns flickered through rapid sequences of color, confusion, anger, fear, and something that might have been calculation. This changes everything. The balance of power in the galaxy has already changed, Sarah finished. You're just now becoming aware of it. The question is what you plan to do about it. Counselor Zarn's massive frame shifted, stone grinding against stone. The Council has protocols for dealing with emerging threats to galactic stability. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Sarah looked at him with the sort of calm that precedes explosions. Threats, Counselor? Are you classifying humanity as a threat? We're classifying humanity as an unknown variable with clearly superior military and industrial capabilities that have been deliberately concealed from the galactic community, Zarn replied carefully. Standard protocols require. Standard protocols, Sarah interrupted, were written when you thought you were the dominant powers in the galaxy. Let me show you something else. The holographic display shifted, showing what appeared to be empty space. Then, Sarah adjusted the view, and structures became visible, vast, geometric patterns that stretched across light years of space like spider webs made of starlight. The Pandora Network, Sarah explained to the stunned assembly. Quantum entanglement communication arrays that connect every human world instantaneously. When I speak to our colonies in Andromeda, there's no delay. When Earth makes a decision, every human settlement knows about it immediately. Admiral Vextar's voice came out as a strangled buzz. Real-time communication across galactic distances? That's theoretically impossible. Only if you're limited to three-dimensional thinking, Sarah replied. Quantum entanglement operates outside normal space-time. We've simply scaled it up. Prime Scientist Lethera had begun to shake, her crystalline body resonating with harmonic vibrations of distress. Dr. Chun, what you're describing isn't just technological advancement. It's a complete paradigm shift. If humanity can communicate instantaneously across any distance, if you can harness stellar energy at will, if you can move between galaxies in days instead of millennia, if we can do all of that, Sarah said quietly, then what does that make us? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Each species in the chamber had defined themselves by their technological achievements, their ancient wisdom, their mastery of space and time. The Zephyrians were the biomasters, shapers of living starships, and atmospheric gardeners. The Karathi were the swarm logicians, perfect coordinators of vast fleets and industrial operations. The Valdari were the deep builders, patient architects of structures that lasted geological ages. The Threnodai were the pattern seekers, mappers of possibility, and masters of mathematical prediction. But if a species barely 50 years into galactic contact had surpassed all of their achievements combined, what did that say about the fundamental assumptions they had built their civilizations on? Director Kethvar drifted closer to Sarah's table, her patterns now settled into the deep blues and purples of serious contemplation. Dr. Chun, what does humanity want? It was the first time any of them had asked that question, Sarah realized. In all their discussions about the Andromeda expedition, about humanity's role in galactic civilization, about the future of the galaxy itself, none of them had ever actually asked what humans wanted to achieve. Survival, Sarah replied simply. The same thing you want. You're afraid the galaxy is dying, and you're right. We've run our own calculations, and the timeline is actually shorter than you think. 70,000 years, not 100,000. The number hit the assembly like a physical blow. Even for long-lived species, 70,000 years was barely enough time to plan, much less execute, a galactic evacuation. But survival isn't just about escaping to Andromeda, Sarah continued. It's about thriving there, building something better than what we have here, creating a civilization that can face whatever challenges the universe throws at it. Admiral Vextar's mandibles clicked nervously. And humanity believes they should lead this new civilization. Humanity believes the species best equipped to lead should lead, Sarah corrected. And, right now, that appears to be us. She gestured to her display, which now showed comparative projections. Our expansion rate, our industrial capacity, our technological capabilities, they're all several orders of magnitude beyond what any other species can achieve. This is unacceptable, Counselor Zarn rumbled, his stone features set in hard lines. No single species can be permitted to dominate galactic civilization. The diversity of our community will be preserved, Sarah said firmly. We're not talking about conquest or subjugation. We're talking about leadership during a crisis that requires unprecedented speed and efficiency. When the galaxy is dying, there's no time for committee decisions and diplomatic compromises. Prime Scientist Lethera's voice came out as a crystalline whisper. Dr. Chun, what assurance do we have that humanity won't simply dispose of the rest of us once you've achieved your goals? Sarah looked at her with something that might have been sympathy. The same assurance you've always had. None. But consider this. If we wanted to dispose of you, would we be having this conversation? Would we have revealed our capabilities instead of simply proceeding with our own plans? The logic was undeniable, but it didn't make the situation any less terrifying for species that had dominated galactic politics for millennia. Sarah could see them struggling with a reality that overturned everything they thought they knew about their place in the universe. There is another option, she said quietly, letting her words cut through their internal struggles. You could work with us instead of against us. Director Kethvar's patterns shifted to cautious interest. Work with you how? Each species in this room has capabilities that complement our own. Zephyrian bioadaptation technology could improve our terraforming systems. Karathi swarm logic could optimize our industrial processes. Valdari construction methods could help us build more durable colonies. Threnodai pattern analysis could help us predict and avoid potential problems in Andromeda. Sarah activated a new display, showing integrated projections that made even the skeptical assembly pause. Human expansion rates combined with alien expertise, technological fusion that produced results none of them could achieve alone. Partnership, she continued, not domination. Leadership when speed is essential, collaboration when wisdom is needed. The difference is that partnership would be a choice, not a necessity. Admiral Vextar leaned back in his chair, his compound eyes reflecting calculations that went beyond simple military assessments. And if we choose not to partner with you? Sarah's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes grew cold. Then, you choose to be left behind. We proceed with our Andromeda project with whatever partners we can find. And you solve your own evacuation problems with your own resources on your own timeline. The brutal simplicity of it sent chills through the assembly. Humanity wasn't threatening war or conquest. They were offering a choice between cooperation and irrelevance. For species that had spent millennia as the dominant powers in galactic civilization, the choice between being junior partners or being ignored entirely was almost worse than the threat of destruction. How long do we have to decide? Counselor Zarn asked finally. Sarah checked her chronometer with apparent casualness. Our Andromeda expedition launches in 6 standard months, with or without galactic participation. The advanced ships are already built and crewed. The decision is entirely yours. 6 months. For beings who thought in terms of centuries and millennia, 6 months was barely enough time to have a proper debate, much less reach a consensus among dozens of species with conflicting interests. Dr. Chun, Director Kethvar said slowly, "You've clearly been planning this moment for a very long time." 50 years, Sarah confirmed. Every day since first contact, we've been preparing for the moment when we would stop pretending to be weak and start acting like what we really are. And what is that? Prime Scientist Lethera whispered. Sarah Chin stood up from her chair, and, for the first time since entering the chamber, she let them see something beyond diplomatic professionalism. She let them see the determination of a species that had clawed its way up from a single world to galactic prominence in the span of a few generations. She let them see the impatience of beings who measured their lives in decades, not millennia, and who refused to wait for permission to save themselves. The future, she said simply. Then, she walked out of the chamber, leaving 5 of the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy to contemplate the fact that they were no longer in control of their own destiny. Sarah's personal quarters had become the center of a diplomatic revolution. Over the past 72 hours, representatives from 43 different species had requested private meetings with the human delegation. The problem was that the human delegation consisted entirely of Dr. Sarah Chun, and she was discovering that being the sole representative of the galaxy's newest superpower was exhausting. Her current visitor was Ambassador Tvara of the Hellion Confederacy, a species of silicon-based crystalline beings whose thoughts moved through their bodies as patterns of light. Tvara's faceted form refracted the room's illumination into rainbow patterns that shifted with her emotional state, currently displaying the deep blues and greens of desperation. Dr. Chun, my people have maintained neutrality for 8,000 years. We've never aligned ourselves with any of the major powers, never participated in galactic politics beyond basic trade agreements. Tvara's voice resonated like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. But what you've revealed changes everything. If humanity is truly capable of intergalactic colonization on the scale you've described, you're wondering if your neutrality will protect you when the galaxy dies, Sarah finished. She had heard variations of this conversation dozens of times in the past 3 days. The answer is no, Ambassador. Neutrality doesn't work against stellar collapse and galactic drift. Tvara's light patterns flickered through rapid sequences of fear and calculation. My people have not built starships in millennia. Our entire civilization is based on deep core mining and crystalline growth. We couldn't evacuate ourselves if we had 10 times the warning you've given us. Sarah studied the alien ambassador with the same analytical intensity she brought to scientific problems. The minor species, those who weren't part of the galactic power structure, had been largely ignored by the major councils when discussing the Andromeda expedition. Now they were discovering that their exclusion from the planning might mean exclusion from survival itself. What are you asking for, Ambassador? Passage, Tvara said simply, her patterns settling into steady, pleading colors. Space aboard your colony ships for a breeding population of our species. We can offer mineral expertise, crystalline computing technology, harmonic communication systems, in exchange for saving your civilization. Yes. Sarah made notes on her data pad, adding the Helians to a list that was growing longer by the hour. I'll add your request to our consideration list. Is there anything else? Tvara's patterns shifted to something like embarrassment. Dr. Chun, there are rumors among the minor species. Rumors that humanity has been recruiting for some time. Sarah's stylus paused over her data pad. What kind of rumors? The Nethes Consortium claims that human traders approached them 6 months ago with offers to transport their entire population to new worlds in exchange for manufacturing agreements. The Quinn Collective reports similar contacts regarding their biomedical expertise. Tvara leaned forward, her crystalline structure singing with harmonic frequencies of urgency. Dr. Chun, have you already chosen which species will survive? The question hung in the air between them like an accusation. Sarah set down her stylus and looked directly at the ambassador, her expression unreadable. Ambassador, let me ask you something in return. In the 8,000 years of your people's neutrality, how many times have the major galactic powers consulted you about decisions that affected your survival? Never, Tvara admitted. We've always been too small to matter. And now you discover that the galaxy is dying, and the major powers have spent centuries planning an evacuation that doesn't include you. How does that make you feel? Tvara's light patterns shifted through deep purples and blacks, colors Sarah had learned to associate with species' deep anger. Expendable. Exactly, Sarah said quietly. You feel expendable because, to them, you are expendable. They've been planning to save themselves and let the rest of the galaxy die, probably hoping that the minor species wouldn't figure out what was happening until it was too late to demand inclusion. The crystalline ambassador's harmonic resonance dropped to frequencies that vibrated through the deck plating. Dr. Chun, are you saying that humanity would include species that the Council has written off? I'm saying that humanity evaluates species based on their potential contributions to galactic survival, not their current political influence. Sarah activated her holographic display, showing Tvara something that made the ambassador's light patterns flare to brilliant white. These are our preliminary partner agreements. 57 species so far, many of whom the Council considers too minor to matter. Tvara studied the list, her crystalline form singing with harmonics of amazement. The Drift Riders, the Void Walkers, the Deep Miners. Dr. Chun, these species have technologies the major powers don't even know about, because the major powers never bothered to ask. Sarah's voice carried an edge that reminded Tvara that humans, despite their recent rise to prominence, had spent most of their galactic existence being dismissed and overlooked. They assumed that political influence equated to technological capability. We made no such assumption. The communication system chimed, and Sarah glanced at the incoming message notification. Ambassador, I'm afraid we'll need to cut this short. I have another appointment. Of course. Tvara rose, her light patterns settling into the formal configurations of diplomatic courtesy. Dr. Chun, when will we know if the Hellion Confederacy has been accepted for partnership? You'll know within 24 hours, Sarah replied. All of our partnership decisions are being finalized today. After Tvara left, Sarah allowed herself a moment to massage her temples before activating the secure quantum communication link to Earth. Director Harrison's face materialized in her holographic display, but this time he wasn't alone. Behind him, Sarah could see the shadowy figures of Earth's most senior leadership. People whose identities were classified so far above her security clearance that she wasn't even supposed to know they existed. Dr. Chun, Harrison's voice carried undertones of exhaustion and exhilaration. Status report. 57 species have requested formal partnership agreements. 43 have offered preliminary cooperation. 12 have threatened military action if they're excluded from the expedition. Sarah consulted her data pad. The major powers are still debating among themselves, but our intelligence suggests they're leaning toward acceptance of the partnership proposal. And the timeline? Unchanged. The advanced fleet launches in 96 hours, whether they've decided or not. One of the shadowy figures behind Harrison leaned forward, speaking in a voice that carried the authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected billions of lives. Dr. Chun, what's your assessment of the galactic political situation? Are we looking at unified cooperation or fragmented resistance? Sarah considered the question carefully. In the past 3 days, she had watched the foundation of galactic civilization crack under the weight of humanity's revelations. Species that had been allies for millennia were now viewing each other with suspicion, wondering what other secrets might be hidden behind diplomatic facades. The minor powers were openly defying the major councils, demanding inclusion in decisions that had previously been made without their consultation. Fragmented cooperation, she said finally. The major species want to maintain their traditional dominance, but they need our technology to survive. The minor species are grateful for inclusion, but they're also terrified that we might abandon them if the major powers offer us better terms. Everyone wants to survive, but nobody trusts anyone else's motives. Perfect, said the voice from the shadows. Exactly what we predicted. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Sir, Dr. Chun, you've done exactly what we needed you to do. You've shattered the old galactic order and positioned humanity as the only stable power in the chaos. The figure stepped forward slightly, revealing features that Sarah recognized from history books, features that belonged to someone who was supposed to have died 30 years ago. Now comes the real test. Director Harrison activated his own display, showing Sarah something that made her breath catch. It was a tactical projection of the Milky Way galaxy, but overlaid with information she had never seen before. Human settlements weren't scattered randomly across local space. They formed patterns, strategic positions that controlled choke points, resource flows, and communication networks. Dr. Chun, everything you've told the galactic community about our capabilities is true, Harrison continued. But you haven't told them everything. The display zoomed in on specific systems, revealing structures that dwarfed even the stellar batteries she had shown the council. Sarah stared at constructions that could only be described as stellar engineering on a scale that redefined the concept. My God, she whispered. We're not just building colonies. We're rebuilding the galaxy. We're saving it, corrected the figure from the shadows. The galactic decay isn't natural, Dr. Chun. It's the result of millions of years of civilizations treating the galaxy like a resource to be consumed rather than a system to be maintained. The dark matter currents are destabilizing because they've been disrupted by careless FTL travel. The central black hole is becoming more active because the gravitational balance has been shifted by massive stellar engineering projects. Sarah felt the weight of understanding settle on her shoulders like a lead cloak. The major powers know this. They know they caused the problem. Of course they know, Harrison said grimly. Why do you think they've been planning to abandon the galaxy instead of fixing it? Why do you think they've been hiding the situation from their own populations? They know that if the truth got out, every species in the galaxy would demand their heads. The holographic display shifted again, showing projections that made Sarah's head spin. Human technology wasn't just advanced, it was restorative. The quantum drives that allowed faster-than-light travel without disrupting space-time. The stellar batteries that actually stabilized star systems instead of draining them. The terraforming systems that worked with natural planetary processes instead of overwhelming them. We're not just evacuating to Andromeda, Sarah realized. We're giving them a choice between running away and actually fixing what they broke. And making sure that if they choose to run, they do it under our guidance instead of their own, confirmed the shadow figure. Because if they try to apply the same destructive technologies in Andromeda that they used to kill this galaxy, they'll just start the cycle over again. Sarah stood up from her desk, her mind racing through implications and possibilities. The partnership agreements, you want them dependent on us not just for evacuation, but for their entire technological base. We want them to survive, Harrison corrected. But we want them to survive in a way that doesn't threaten the long-term stability of galactic civilization. The age of treating the universe like a disposable resource is over. The communication system chimed again, and Sarah glanced at the priority message that had just arrived. It was from Ambassador Zentar, requesting an immediate meeting with the human delegation. The tone was formal, but she could read the desperation between the lines. Director, I think the major powers have reached their decision. Then, it's time for the final phase, said the shadow figure. Dr. Chun, when you meet with them, remember that you're not negotiating from a position of strength. You are the position of strength. The age of human deference ended the moment you asked if you should pretend you couldn't win. What if they refuse? What if they try to stop us? Harrison smiled grimly. Then, they discover that asking a human to pretend they can't win is like asking a star not to shine. It's simply not in our nature. Sarah ended the communication and prepared for what she knew would be the most important meeting in galactic history. Outside her window, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, unaware that one small species from a minor world was about to determine the fate of trillions of beings across the cosmos. But Sarah Chun was no longer thinking small. She was thinking on the scale of galaxies, of civilizations that spanned millions of years, of choices that would echo through cosmic time. She was thinking like a human who had stopped pretending she couldn't win. The Grand Assembly Chamber had been reconfigured for the final session. Gone were the elevated platforms and hierarchical seating arrangements that had defined galactic politics for millennia. Instead, a circular table dominated the center of the room, with equal seating for all participating species. The symbolism was unmistakable. This was no longer a council of dominant powers dictating terms to lesser beings. This was a negotiation between equals, whether they liked it or not. Sarah arrived precisely on time, carrying only her datapad and a single holographic projector. Around the table, representatives from 67 different species waited in configurations of anxiety, hope, and barely controlled anger. The major powers had positioned themselves together, a show of unity that fooled no one. The minor species had scattered throughout the remaining seats, no longer content to huddle in the background. Ambassador Zentar stood as Sarah entered, his forearms spread in a gesture that was part greeting, part submission. Dr. Chun, thank you for agreeing to this final discussion. The Council has reached several important decisions. I'm sure they have, Sarah replied, taking her seat without ceremony. I trust these decisions take into account the timeline we discussed. Prime Scientist Kethera activated her own display, showing what appeared to be detailed technical specifications. Dr. Chun, we've analyzed your technological demonstrations and confirmed their authenticity. The quantum superposition drives, the stellar energy collection systems, the instantaneous communication networks, all of it is genuinely beyond our current capabilities. Thank you for the confirmation, Sarah said dryly. Though I'm curious why you felt verification was necessary. Counselor Thorek's stone features shifted in what might have been embarrassment. Dr. Chun, what you revealed challenges everything we thought we understood about the development of technological civilization. Traditionally, advanced capabilities require millennia of gradual development. Traditionally, Sarah interrupted, civilizations develop slowly because they become comfortable with their existing advantages. They have time to be cautious, time to debate, time to form committees, and conduct studies. Humans didn't have that luxury. She activated her own projector, showing the familiar image of Earth as it had appeared to first contact teams 50 years earlier. A single world, crowded with billions of beings who had barely achieved interstellar travel. But the image shifted, showing the same planet through different analytical filters, revealing energy signatures and construction patterns that had been invisible to the visiting aliens. We knew from day one that we were entering a galaxy dominated by species who had enjoyed millions of years of technological development. We could either accept permanent inferiority, or we could innovate our way to equality. Sarah's voice carried the weight of 50 years of desperate determination. We chose innovation. Director Kethvar's bioluminescent patterns flickered through sequences of reluctant admiration. Dr. Chun, our analysis indicates that your species has made more technological advances in 5 decades than most civilizations achieve in 5 millennia. The energy expenditure alone was worth it, Sarah finished, because the alternative was irrelevance, and humans don't accept irrelevance as a permanent condition. Ambassador Vextar leaned forward, his compound eyes reflecting calculations that went beyond simple tactical assessments. Dr. Chun, your species' capabilities are concerning to many in the galactic community. The power to travel between galaxies at will, to harness stellar energy, to communicate instantaneously across any distance. These capabilities could theoretically be used to dominate or destroy other civilizations. The accusation hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah looked around the table, noting the way various species had positioned themselves, the subtle body language that indicated alliances and fears and desperate hopes. Admiral, let me ask you something, she said finally. In the past 72 hours, how many species have requested partnership with humanity? How many have offered to contribute their unique capabilities to our joint survival efforts? 57 confirmed partnerships, Vextar admitted grudgingly. Another 15 pending final negotiations. And how many have requested subjugation? How many have asked to become human colonies or vassal states? The silence stretched uncomfortably. Sarah already knew the answer, 0. Not a single species had requested domination, because humanity wasn't offering domination. They were offering something far more valuable in a dying galaxy: competent leadership and genuine inclusion. Dr. Chun, Prime Scientist Lethera said softly, "What exactly does humanity want from this partnership?" It was the same question Director Kethvar had asked days earlier, but now it carried different weight. Now it was being asked by beings who had spent the intervening time coming to terms with the fact that humanity could proceed with or without their cooperation. "We want what every intelligence wants," Sarah replied. "Survival, growth, and the opportunity to reach our full potential. The difference is that we recognize these goals are best achieved through cooperation rather than domination." She gestured to her display, which showed the current state of galactic civilization. Ancient powers hoarding resources and knowledge while minor species struggled with technologies that were centuries out of date. Then, the image shifted, showing projected outcomes under human leadership: rapid technological dissemination, shared resource development, coordinated expansion efforts that benefited everyone. "We want to build something better than what currently exists," Sarah continued. "A galactic civilization based on merit and contribution rather than age and political influence. A community where species are valued for what they can offer, not dismissed because they haven't been spacefaring for millions of years." Counselor Zarn's massive frame shifted, stone grinding against stone. "Dr. Chun, that's a noble sentiment. But how do we know humanity won't change its mind once it has achieved galactic dominance? History suggests that power corrupts even the most well-intentioned leaders." Sarah smiled, and for the first time in days, it was genuinely warm rather than professionally diplomatic. "Counselor, you're still thinking in terms of traditional power structures. You're imagining humanity as another empire, another hierarchy with ourselves at the top, and everyone else serving our interests. Are we wrong to think that?" Director Kethvar asked, her patterns shifting to cautious curiosity. "Completely wrong," Sarah replied. "Because you're forgetting something fundamental about human nature. We're not a hive species like the Karathi or a collective consciousness like the Valdari. We're individuals who choose to work together because it produces better results than working alone. The moment human leadership stops producing better results, human followers will choose different leaders." She activated another display, showing the internal structure of human colonial administration. Instead of the rigid hierarchies that characterized most galactic governments, it showed fluid networks of authority based on expertise and performance. "Our colonies are led by the people best qualified to lead them, regardless of their species of origin," Sarah continued. "Our research teams include any being whose knowledge contributes to the goal. Our exploration fleets are crewed by whoever can best handle the mission requirements." Ambassador Tvara, who had been granted a seat at the main table as a representative of the Minor Species Coalition, resonated with harmonics of amazement. "Dr. Chun, are you saying that non-humans can hold leadership positions in human organizations?" "I'm saying that non-humans already do," Sarah replied. "Dr. Vex Cali of the Drift Riders is currently leading our Stellar Engineering Division. Commander Zothera of the Void Walkers heads our Deep Space Exploration Program. Professor Kilmani of the Crystal Singers manages our quantum communication research." The revelation sent ripples of shock through the assembly. The idea that humans would willingly subordinate themselves to alien authority was contrary to everything the galactic powers believed about dominance-based civilizations. "But how do you maintain unity?" Prime Scientist Kethera asked, her crystalline voice ringing with confusion. "How do you prevent competing interests from fragmenting your civilization?" "Simple," Sarah replied. "We focus on shared goals that benefit everyone. When your objective is survival and prosperity for the greatest number of beings, most policy decisions become obvious." She stood up from her chair, and the gesture commanded attention from every being in the chamber. Ladies, gentlemen, honored entities, the galaxy is dying. We have perhaps 70,000 years before large sections of it become uninhabitable. We can spend that time arguing about who should be in charge, or we can spend it working together to ensure that galactic civilization survives the transition to Andromeda. Sarah activated her final display, showing two projections side by side. The first showed traditional evacuation plans, slow, limited, focused on preserving existing power structures at the cost of billions of lives. The second showed human projections, rapid, inclusive, designed to save as many beings as possible regardless of their current political status. Option 1 preserves the existing order until the galaxy dies, she said. Option 2 builds something better that can thrive in a new galaxy. The choice is yours, but the deadline remains the same. Our advance fleet launches in 18 hours. Ambassador Zintar rose from his seat, his mandibles clicking in the rapid patterns that indicated internal conflict. Dr. Chun, what guarantees can you offer that humanity will honor its partnership commitments? What assurance do we have that this isn't an elaborate deception designed to neutralize potential opposition before establishing human dominance? Sarah looked at him with something that might have been pity. Ambassador, what guarantees have the major powers offered to the minor species? What assurance do they have that the traditional evacuation plans will include them at all? The question struck home. Around the table, representatives of smaller civilizations shifted uncomfortably, remembering decades of exclusion from important decisions, centuries of being treated as irrelevant to galactic affairs. You want guarantees, Sarah continued. Fine. Every partnership agreement includes automatic withdrawal clauses. Any species can leave the human coalition at any time, for any reason, with full support for establishing independent colonies. We're not interested in holding unwilling participants. She paused, letting the implications sink in. But consider this. In 3 days, we've achieved more interspecies cooperation than the Galactic Council has managed in 3 centuries. We've solved technological problems that have stymied your best scientists for millennia. We've offered genuine partnership to species that your traditional leaders have ignored or dismissed. Director Kethvar's patterns settled into deep, contemplative blues. Dr. Chun, what happens if we say no? What happens if the major powers choose to proceed with our own evacuation plans? Then, you proceed with your own plans, on your own timeline, with your own resources, Sarah replied simply. We'll establish our colonies in Andromeda, you'll establish yours, and we'll see who builds a more successful civilization. The brutal honesty of it resonated through the chamber like a bell. Sarah wasn't threatening war or sabotage. She was offering competition, and everyone in the room knew which side was more likely to win. However, she added, there is one thing you should consider. The galaxy isn't just dying. It's dying because of specific technological practices that have destabilized stellar formation and disrupted gravitational currents. If you apply the same technologies in Andromeda that killed this galaxy, you'll face the same problems in a few million years. Counselor Zarin's stone features cracked in what might have been surprise. Dr. Chen, are you suggesting that galactic decay isn't natural? I'm stating a fact that your own scientists have known for centuries, Sarah replied. The difference is that human technology was designed from the beginning to work with natural systems instead of overwhelming them. Our colonies enhance stellar stability. Our FDL drives strengthen spacetime rather than weakening it. Our energy collection systems extend stellar lifespans instead of shortening them. She activated one final display, showing projections that made the entire assembly lean forward in amazement. Under human technological guidance, Andromeda wouldn't just survive galactic colonization. It would thrive, becoming more stable and life-supporting than it had been before their arrival. So, Sarah said quietly, you can join us in building something better, or you can repeat the same mistakes that killed this galaxy. But you can't do both. Ambassador Zintar looked around the table, noting the expressions of hope, fear, and calculation on dozens of alien faces. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of species survival and the end of an era. Dr. Chun, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I formally request partnership terms for the Andromeda expedition. Sarah smiled. And this time it was the expression of a human who had never doubted she could win. Ambassador, I thought you'd never ask. Outside the chamber's windows, the stars continued their ancient dance, unaware that one small species from an unremarkable world had just assumed responsibility for the future of galactic civilization. But in the quantum communication networks that connected human colonies across the galaxy, the message was already spreading. The age of human deference was over, and the age of human leadership had begun. Sarah Chun gathered her notes and prepared to transform the galaxy. After all, they had asked her to stop pretending she couldn't win. It was time to show them what winning actually looked like.